I need Finn to marry me.
I love you so much it hurts.
That you're getting out of the romance biz. So what happened?
But let's just say the time has come to stop dating princesses and return to saving them.
And you're not just saying that to make yourself seem more attractive?
But where would I go without you?
I'll never know.
That song's about her, isn't it?
Of course, it's not even subtle.
I stood by and allowed you to sacrifice yourself for me, even though part of me should have known better.
One of my most favorite animated things that came out this summer was Fiona and Cake, which was like the slightly more for adult audience like sequel to Adventure Time that was like so insanely good, really well received. I started watching that show when I was like 11 years old. As a kid, you pick up on some of these themes, but I think like, you know, you just like lack the maturity to really like understand what the show is trying to say.
Wow, I wrote that? Hot stuff.
What? You don't remember what it means?
I would call it the hidden thesis of Adventure Time, which is obsession is not love. It was a theme that was so clear in Fiona and Cake, especially through like Simon and Betty's relationship.
I stood by and allowed you to sacrifice yourself for me, even though part of me should have known better.
When I realized that was the theme of Fiona and Cake, I started to realize that maybe it was also the theme of the entire show in general. So hear me out. We're going to go through all of it. Before we get into the complexity that was Simon and Betty and student and professor and man and God, we'll get to that. Put a pin in that. But I wanted to start small. In the original series of Adventure Time, Finn and his relationships.
That you're getting out of the romance biz. So what happened?
Let's just say the time has come to stop dating princesses and return to saving them.
And you're not just saying that to make yourself seem more attractive?
Yeah, of course. No games going on here.
They're always contrasted with Jake and his marriage to Lady Rainicorn.
I'm a dad now. It's a pretty big whoop.
Which is like, seems fairly emotionally stable, and they have children.
Consider my counteroffer. Father love! I love you, 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 I love you.
And because of the genetics of their kids, Jake's kids outgrow him. They like literally become older than him.
TV, Viola, Kim Kil-wan, and this sweet little lady is Jake Jr.
So he can't be like a very present father, which was like one of my favorite plot lines in the original show.
I love all my little babies so much.
Shouldn't you be at work?
Yeah, no. I never even looked for a job.
Really?
But basically, we see that like Lady Rainicorn and Jake are clearly in love with each other. Like he speaks Korean for her, but also at the same time, like they have healthy boundaries and space from each other. Like Jake still lives with Finn because he kind of takes care of him as his older brother.
The matter will be settled on the battleground.
All right!
The battleground of love.
Aww. But the most original like version of this theme is in the super early seasons. I almost forget about them sometimes, but Finn's original romantic interest was Princess Bubblegum, the maniac, the psycho herself.
Finn, you gotta stop this jealous business.
She hates me now.
Back before we knew that she was like as unhinged as she is, but we like kind of like, there were all these jokes where it's like, oh, you know, PB's too old for Finn, and like, even as a teenager, you kind of recognize that their dynamic is sort of like a Dipper Wendy kind of deal.
I'm too old for you. I mean, you know that, right?
Where like Finn is too young for her, but he doesn't really realize that, and we actually don't realize that she's like way old, like 800 or something like that. I'll Google it. She's like at least 400 years old, right? She's really old. But back then, we just assumed she's like maybe in her 20s, and Finn is like 11 or 12 in the first few seasons. And as the show goes on, he starts to become like very tormented by this idea that he really likes her and she's not reciprocating.
I was in love with you, okay? And you didn't love me back.
Sometimes you want someone and you want to kiss them and be with them, but you can't because responsibility demands sacrifice.
So he's like, you know, obsessed with her, which like leads Finn into his first real relationship in the show, which is with Flame Princess.
What's wrong with me, huh? You don't like me?
I like you?
Which I thought, like, as a kid, because I was sort of a late bloomer and I did not care about romantic plot lines when I was like 13. I don't know, that just was not my thing. I used to hate this plot line, which is really funny because as an adult, I think it's really sweet and like low-key, that Pixar movie, Elemental, is just a lame version of what Adventure Time did years ago. We like watch all of this come to a head in an episode where Flame Princess breaks up with Finn.
That letter said things in it that only you would know. Personal things, Finn. And you used them against me. I need some time alone.
Princess.
And Finn like sets her up to fight the Ice King, which like ends in disaster.
I don't like being made fun of, Ice King.
That's like his first heartbreak, and he's like learning, you know, the consequences of his actions of like being too obsessed with this girl.
See your face all over, ooh, sticks to me like a coat of glue. I can't get over you.
I think what is better than the arc about their relationship is like everything that comes after. But what I like is that like she's still a reoccurring character in the show, you know, like she had this whole other plotline going on with her and her dad and the kingdom, and like she was trying to take the kingdom from her father.
She's an unstoppable force of destruction. Nothing a psycho like you can't handle.
And she had this internal struggle of whether she was going to be good or evil because her dad was evil.
I have learned so much watching this beautiful woman work. And with her example, I have become a better man.
Like she and Finn run into each other as they become like older teenagers in the show, and you know they kind of have like a cordial friendship for the rest of the show. Finn has his whole heartbreak era, and we kind of learn that like one of his biggest weaknesses is his deep obsession with the girls that he falls in love with.
We both know you're totally in love with me.
So that's kind of where we'll leave Finn for a second, because I feel like we need to get into the more obvious comparative, which is Ice King, who literally kidnaps women for like multiple seasons before we get any context on that at all. He is a person defined by obsession. He's clearly obsessed with these relationships with women that are not reciprocated. He does not care about consent. He's obsessed with his penguin. I have a little penguin here for visual aid. The character who we find out later is like has been driven mad. He's not even himself. And his madness is like very defined by his obsession with his loneliness, which I've always found like really interesting and sad. There are like multiple episodes where one of my favorites, I always talk about this episode, is the episode with the life-giving magus, where Ice King tricks him into touching his furniture, which like turns them sentient. And his hope is that his furniture will then become his friend group. And then like all of his furniture have a party without him because they hate him.
Aristotle once said, nature abhors a vacuum. Then why do I love doing this so much?
Excuse me, I have to silently back away now.
What? What are you talking about?
You cry in the night times. We all hear you crying.
He needs to hear more devastating truth.
So it's like, there's these multiple episodes. There's one where he kidnaps a ton of princesses and puts them all in a cage, and Finn is also kidnapped. And like Ice King's trying to throw like a party for them, and the way that he gets defeated in the end is that they like throw a party inside the jail cell, and when they trick him into like opening it because he just wants to be a part of the party, they like knock him out and they all escape.
Oh, what's happening? Because I left the room?
Because they like it here. Because they like you. Because you're a really fun guy.
I don't get this.
Wait, no, don't leave! Everyone was finally warming up to me.
No, that is not the case.
Later in the show, when we learn that he was not always crazy, and that he used to be a normal man before the crown, and that he was in love with a woman.
Hello, my name is Simon Petrikov. After purchasing this crown, I brought it home and excitedly showed my fiancée Betty. The visions, I fought with them, shouted at them until I realized it wasn't real, it was the crown, and saw my fiancé in front of me, looking at me with such contempt. All I know is I never saw Betty again.
I always interpreted that to be like, oh, this is an explanation for, even in his like crazy mind, that he's like obsessed with these princesses and kidnapping them because in some way they're like a stand-in for Betty.
And then maybe Betty, my princess, maybe you will love me again. Please love me again, Betty.
Which is really sad. So I feel like the show is setting up like all these examples of obsessive love or just obsession in general. And I feel like the show is constantly trying to communicate that being obsessed with someone or being obsessed with the idea of them or being obsessed with the loss of them, all of these things are negative outlooks on life, negative outlooks on love.
What you're feeling is called infatuation. The pain is a product of you overvaluing a projected imaginary relationship with me.
So many examples of, I think, healthier, positive love relationships. A main one that I think about is Marceline and the Ice King before he turns back into Simon. Because their whole backstory is that like before he lost his mind, he was sort of a father figure to her, but now that he has lost his mind, he doesn't really even remember her anymore. But we see that, you know, like she plays basketball with him and hangs out with him and she worries about him. Like he cannot reciprocate this love or care that she's giving him because he's just, you know, like physically incapable of it.
Simon? What are you doing here?
And all my friends were in grave danger and horrible torment.
And you wanted to help?
No! I felt left out. I'm just a phone call away, you know.
I'm sorry, Simon. Next time for sure.
She's loyal to him. That's a really important part of her character development. Like we really start to know and like her after we learn more about her relationship with Simon. Obviously her relationship with PB is like one to be discussed as well. Those are the relationships in the original show. Now I kind of want to move on to Distant Lands, which are these sequel episodes that they made a couple years ago in this like hiatus between Adventure Time ending and Fiona and Cake coming out. I think the idea of obsession and love is still really relevant in Distant Lands because let's like continue the thread of PB and Marceline. They have a whole episode in Distant Lands that is all about their relationship before Adventure Time even started, because that was a question that they never answered in the original show, which is like at the start of the show, even in the early seasons, you get this weird vibe that like they used to be together, but they don't like each other anymore. But, you know, like PB owns a shirt from Marceline and, you know, Marceline loses her stuffed animal and Princess Bubblegum is the first to help her. And you're kind of like, what's going on with them, you know? And they get together again by the end of Adventure Time, but we never got the answer to the question, like, how'd they meet each other? Why did they break up? Why did they not like each other for a while? So this is one of my favorite Distant Lands episodes because it gives all that context. And I feel like it just makes their characters and their relationship even more fulfilling to me. Like they are the epitome of two people who meet each other, they're not right for each other at the time, and then they take a lot of time away. Both of them being kind of immortal, I feel like stretches this timeline, which again, I find like very funny and charming. But in their immortal way, they spend years and years apart, growing as people. You know, you learn that Princess Bubblegum, kind of near the end of Adventure Time, the original run, you learn that she has crazy drama and like trauma related to her family and like how she came to like run the kingdom. And of course, like we've learned so much about Marceline, like her relationship with her dad in the Nightosphere, and also her past as a vampire hunter, her past with Simon, who like then became the Ice King. Like we learned that there is so much going on for both of them, and they break up at the epitome of when their relationship is not functional.
No, I don't believe you cared about me, 'cause you left me drowning. I'm so glad that I woke up. I'm still living under your thumb.
But I really took away from that episode that like people can be right for each other, but the timing can be wrong. And when you take time to develop as your own person, you can have a more successful relationship, which again, I feel like plays into the not being obsessed with someone and being more personally invested in your own self-worth and your own growth. And I think the epitome of that is in the Distant Lands episode that's about Finn and Jake, which this episode, it destroys me emotionally, so I'm like a little scared to even watch it again to make this video. We know that Jake has died. We get some context for this in a couple episodes. In the PB and Marceline episode, we see Finn as an adult, and he has like what seems to be a memorial tattoo of Jake on his chest because Jake is not with him, so everyone watched that and was like, oh my god, Jake is dead. And when I first saw that, I was like, I don't know, like, I guess, like, you know, Adventure Time loves using lack of context to kind of deepen their lore a little bit. So I was like, okay, I could accept that, but like I would like to hear a little more. And then we did get that because the Distant Lands episode about Finn and Jake is all about how Jake dies, probably like fairly soon after the events of like the finale of Adventure Time, which is really sad. Because we learned that like Finn has lived a lot of his life with Jake being dead, and he's lived a pretty obsessive and like unhealthy life since Jake died because he wasn't ever able to get over his death. Which again, whoa, this was a kid's show, like where are we going with this? But I don't know, I really liked this idea because the person that they set Finn up to be in the original show was someone who's like obsessed with heroism, and he's obsessed and codependent really with Jake as his older brother.
Oh, no, 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 Jake! Jake!
Because as we discussed, Jake still lives with him, takes care of him, looks out for him, even though he's like a married man with kids. I think it's sort of a bold stance to say like, oh, this character that you've looked up to, and for someone my exact age, I literally grew up with Finn. Like I was his exact age when I started watching the show. That, you know, despite like his good deeds or despite his good traits, he's still a person who's like deeply flawed. And I think what's true for a lot of people is like we don't know how to grieve loss. We don't even know where to begin with that. And loss can like totally destroy you. And, you know, it's like, who's to say that that will ever change or end? For some people, there is just an obsession and a love that is too strong to ever fully be functional after such an intense loss. Finn and Jake talk about how if one of them dies first, they'll do like a clapping pattern, like in the afterworld to find each other. So when we see old man Finn finally die, he becomes young again in the afterlife. And he's like immediately doing the clapping, like trying to find Jake.
Promise me you'll listen for this sound.
What?
Just that there's a lot of dead people there, we might get separated.
Gene. Anyway, your spiritual style and past life quotient usually... What are you doing?
It's a signal Jake came up with so we could find each other if we got separated in death.
And he's searching and searching through all the like the dead worlds, and he can't find Jake. And he starts to feel like Jake isn't even looking for him. And then we find out that Jake is like at the highest dead world because he is the most enlightened between the two of them.
Jake, why didn't you wait for me?
I was hanging out in Nirvana beyond all desire when I picked up your vibe. I'll see you when you get to the 50th.
Wait! I'm not doing fine, you ding-dong! Why don't you care?
I wish I could help, but I've moved beyond all this stuff.
Which means that he wants for nothing, and he's fully accepting of life and death as it is. Which is very not true for Finn, because he is established to be like a man obsessed, and he always has been. In love and in heroism and in everything. And I think that's like something that as a kid we look up to him for, because it's amazing to see like a character obsessed and motivated for, you know, to achieve things. But as an adult, we get to see how this mentality makes him like very codependent and very miserable, honestly. And they have like this reunion where Finn is really resentful of Jake for seemingly having moved on and being like enlightened. I found that episode really, really touching because it's so difficult. It's expressing things that even though I'm like saying things right now, I feel like you just have to watch it and like understand and feel the emotions of it. Because it's expressing things that are beyond words, honestly. Like, obsession is a form of love for sure. But I think what the show is trying to say is that it's not exactly our healthiest way to relate to someone that we care so deeply about. Which is why I was really shocked by where Fiona and Cake goes.
Oh, Betty.
because it unpacks this relationship that I honestly really revered in the original series, which is Simon and Betty. Betty is this woman that the Ice King knew when he was just a human man, Simon, before he put this crown on and it drove him insane. And in the original series, we don't know much about them, just that they worked together, and eventually Betty becomes a reoccurring character because she literally steps through time.
I'm 1,000 years in the future, love. I opened this portal so we could say goodbye.
You're dumping me?
You dum-dum!
But she steps through time to get to the Ice King, and then she spends a ton of the later seasons doing all sorts of crazy things. She gains magical powers, using science to try and fix the Ice King, basically, to bring back Simon and undo the madness of the crown. And I always I remember before Fiona and Cake came out, I would always say oh my god, I would love to do a Simon and Betty cosplay. I found it very interesting when I was watching Fiona and Cake with a couple of friends who know Adventure Time, but definitely not to the level that I would like to speak about Adventure Time. I was telling them, I'm so excited for this. I love Simon and Betty. And then Fiona and Cake shows their meeting. And I find it so interesting because my friends were oh, were they always student and professor? That's a little bit interesting. Their power dynamic there is a little bit weird.
Excuse me, Dr. Petrikov?
Oh, library girl.
Oh, you remembered.
Whatever, I'm sure the show isn't going to address it, whatever. They're probably not even thinking about this. So imagine my surprise when the rest of the show literally ends up being this diagnosis of their relationship, and finally a recharacterization of Betty that I thought was, obviously as a young woman, really resonated with me, which is that she gave up everything to be with Simon. She gave up her research. She gave up her life.
But I can't.
I'm sorry for messing everything up.
Wait!
Betty! Betty!
However it has to happen. I wish for the power to keep Simon safe.
And then she literally steps through time and spends her future life also dedicated all to him.
But where would I go without you?
Which, it's that obsession that's romanticized, but I love that Fiona and Cake finally deep analyze that, because all of her plotline is about how unfair that is to a person. I just thought that was such an emotionally mature take, and it continues this theme, which is that obsession alone is not romantic love. And it's interesting, right? Because the ending of the original show is so tragic because, again, she gives up everything for Simon. She literally merges with a giant god, and we're unsure if she lost all of herself in that transformation, but she saved Simon's life to do that.
Oh, Betty. Is that what it was like? I stood by and allowed you to sacrifice yourself for me. I could have made the effort to support you the way you always supported me. Let's go check out some petroglyphs.
Really? You do that for me?
But wait, this isn't how it happened.
No, we made our choices.
I never really thought about it that deeply. I was wow, so tragic. Their story is basically just two people who can just never get the timing right. But upon further, deeper reflection, I think it's so much deeper than that, because Fiona and Cake becomes almost a meditation on the lengths a person has to go to sometimes to regain their own sense of self and their own empowerment. Because this thing that we initially assumed that Betty has destroyed herself to save Simon.
Betty, are you in there? Even a little?
We learn that she has become this ginormous, all-powerful god that literally can destroy the Lich like this.
Answer me! What more could I have done? What do you want from me now?
We learned that through that episode, she is sentient enough to be able to still communicate this to him, even though she's no longer vocal and she doesn't seem to respond to anything he says to her.
No, we made our choices. We could have made better ones, but I don't have any regrets.
There are so many themes that could be unpacked in Fiona and Cake, but that was my main takeaway. I liked that it didn't fully condemn their relationship, because it's really true that you can gain a lot of happiness from a love that is very based in obsession. I think that's like something most people can relate to. And I think what was the most relatable about it is that sometimes only in hindsight can we realize that that was the dynamic going on. And it's hard to accept because you want to just believe that you were in love or you experienced love. Like, that's such a magical thing, you know? Why go back and like recharacterize it some other way? But I think what the show is expressing, and what I also think is probably true about life, is that it's healthy to revisit our own relationships and dynamics and figure out, you know, like what motivates them and if that's really healthy and if there are like healthier ways to experience or express love. Either way, there are so many other themes going on in Fiona and Cake, even based in other relationships that like I talked about in this video. I think it's really interesting that we see, like, even though Marceline is a very important part of Simon's story and his backstory, and a lot of like why he feels good about himself is that he was able to take care of her for so long. We also, like, Marceline's strangely not present in Fiona and Cake very much, even though she's like a fan favorite. And I thought that was really smart too, you know, because it seems like Simon is learning that even though he loves her and, you know, like he knows that she loves her too, he has to give her space because she is in her own relationship with PB now. And, you know, she's an adult, he's an adult. And I felt like that also expressed something really interesting just about like the phases of your life and the types of relationships that you have with people. And just because things change doesn't mean that you don't love someone anymore.
Please, Simon, I can help you with this.
Yeah, maybe one day you will. But until then, you have to stay brave, my fearless Marceline.
But relationships go through all seasons of changes, and I thought that was also a really interesting and smart decision. And yeah, we even see in Fiona and Cake, we see adult Finn in a couple universes, but we do see like our original Finn for one episode. And I found that like really touching and again, sad because they have fully confirmed the death of Jake. And we see Finn in this place where he's clearly not healed from it. And we learn from Distant Lands that he basically never heals from it. Like he only in the afterlife fully experiences like a reckoning with this obsession that he has with Jake. But we see in Fiona and Cake, when he's probably like in his 30s or whatever, that he tries to help Simon, but he himself is still so debilitated by the death of Jake that he's fairly unhelpful, even though, you know, he tries really hard. And again, that seems like really in character for Finn. I love the moment when he says, like, I just love fixing people, after he does something like totally unhelpful for Simon by like taking him out to the woods and like making him fight a bear or something. That just like felt so richly in character for Finn, and also sad, because it's sad to see like a character that you grew up with be so painfully human. It's why Adventure Time will always be my favorite cartoon, because there, I feel like, is just a real human element to it that is unique to it. And I really enjoyed Fiona and Cake. So if you have thoughts, if you think I was totally off, if you have your own experiences, let me know. And if you want me to talk more about Adventure Time, oh baby, just say the word. Okay, bye.
You were a wonderful experience.
You were everything.